Good afternoon or evening, everybody, and welcome back to another weather forecast by Adrian's Weather Forecast. In this video, we're going to be doing another tropical update. And in this video, we're going to be talking about PTC6, which basically just became a potential tropical cyclone not too long ago. I believe it did become a PTC just a few hours ago. I'm not sure if it was a 2 o'clock update, but it is now out here. So we do have PTC6 at 35 miles an hour, and the reason why it is a potential tropical cyclone and not a tropical depression is because it is a threat towards the land within the next 48 hours, and obviously that is a lesser Antilles, so that's exactly what we're going to keep a very close eye on. Right now it is moving west-northwest at 15 miles an hour, so it is not the fastest nor is it the slowest moving storm. As we can overall see, formation for the next 48 hours and 5 days is both a 80%. So actually, it was an 80-80 invest or AOI earlier today. I believe was it 8 a.m. and now it is a PTC, and obviously Invest 93L is now at its near 0% for the next 48 hours and 5 days. But definitely keeping a close eye on PTC6 as this is very, very likely to become Tropical Storm Fred, like I mentioned in my video yesterday. However, again, the audio is very just cut out. I don't know why, but I did mention that this could very well become a tropical storm. However, I don't have much confidence it's becoming a hurricane. I really think it'll probably be a 60 or 65 mile an hour tropical storm maximum. But overall, I'm going to just get into a very deep forecast in this video. But let's go ahead and get to the actual forecast. So here's a look here at the actual first advisory here on the PTC6. So I'm not gonna really go in depth with this actual discussion here, but ASCAT data from this morning revealed a sharp trough axis, but the system lacked a well-defined circulation. However, recent visible satellite imagery hints at a better defined center may be forming just southwest of the primary convective mass. So it looks like the actual main low pressure, or LLC, is just southwest of the actual main primary convective burst. These trends suggest the system is likely to become a tropical depression or storm tonight or Tuesday when it moves near the Lesser Antilles and to the Eastern Caribbean. Therefore, advisories are being initiated on the system in order to issue tropical storm watches for a portion of the Lesser Antilles, U.S. Virgin Islands, Puerto Rico, and part of Dominican Republic. So there are tropical storm watches in effect for this PTC. So this system is still in its formative stage. The initial motion estimate is somewhat uncertain. A mid-tropospheric ridge anchored over the western Atlantic should steer a system west-northwestward through the forecast period. Although there's high confidence in the overall steering pattern of the next several days, there's low than normal confidence in the details of the track forecast, especially in the short range due to the lack of well-defined center. So basically, since there's not really an actual ideal LLC center, since it's kind of more of an elongated low pressure, there's really not much confidence with the actual forecast track. So that's why it's going to go on and off. So it's likely to become a tropical storm as it moves through the Lesser Antilles tonight. So there is a chance it could very well be a tropical storm by tonight. So overall, keeping a very, very close eye on it. Tropical storm conditions are possible in portions of the southern Leeward Islands tonight and Tuesday into the Virgin Islands and Puerto Rico beginning Tuesday afternoon and to the Dominican Republic by Wednesday. Heavy rainfall could lead to flash urban and small stream flooding and potential mudslides across the U.S. Virgin Islands and Puerto Rico. The greatest threat for flooding impacts will be across eastern and southeastern portions of Puerto Rico. There's a risk for wind and rainfall impacts in portions of Hispaniola, the Turks and Caicos, southeastern Bahamas, Cuba later this week. Although the forecast is more uncertain, like I did say, because of the actual elongated low pressure. But here's now an actual look at the actual advisory. So there's an initial forecast, obviously at 35 miles an hour with the PTC. But looking at the next 12 hours here, looking at a potential 40-mile tropical system. And by the next 24 hours, 45 miles an hour. So this could very well be a low-end tropical storm within the next 24 hours, and then by 36 hours, a 50-mile-an-hour tropical storm. So look, the peak right now is going to be 50. However, once it actually goes over Hispaniola and weakens down to 40, it's going to go back up to 45. So I would not rule out the possibility this thing can get to its peak, possibly in the eastern Gulf of Mexico, and possibly make a landfall near where Sally may landfall near Mobile/Pensacola region. But overall, I'm just going to keep it very close on it because it is in a very conducive environment at the moment, obviously. There's a lot of moisture. There's really little shears. So as it continues to get towards the portion of the U.S. Virgin Islands and obviously portion of the Lesser Antilles, it's going to be very interesting whether it can very well become a tropical storm as early as tonight. So here's a look here at the actual latest ASCAT here in knots. So here's a look. You can actually see to the northeast of the actual low pressure, there is 30 knots, which is basically 35 miles an hour, which is exactly why the National Hurricane Center has this as a 35-mile an hour PTC. We do have we obviously do have tropical depression, almost tropical storm force winds here into the northeastern quadrant. However, just to the southwest is exactly where this low pressure is. But since it's likely to impact, obviously, or it's going to obviously impact land within the next 48 hours or less, they do have it as a PTC, even though it does not have the actual winds, but it does actually have the structure for it to be considered a PTC and not just a tropical depression. But obviously, there you can kind of see the calmer winds and actually less amount of convection towards the actual south towards the actual location of the actual pressure itself. But you see a lot of that convection burst and overall stronger winds to the northeast of the actual low pressure. And overall, we are seeing, let's see here, overall around anywhere from 15 to 20 knots kind of towards the western quadrant, and another small area of actually nearly 30 knots as well to the northwest quadrant. So overall, this thing has definitely got a good structure here overall, a good amount of banding overall, winds kind of developing towards portions of outside the actual low pressure itself, but really some strong winds just to the northeast of the northeast quadrant. So I'm going to keep a very close eye on that for the next few hours, because definitely the National Hurricane Center did mention there's a very small possibility, however, it's possible that we can very well get a tropical storm by tonight. Here's looking at the actual visible satellite imagery on this storm, and this storm is looking very good compared to what it looked like yesterday and overall this morning. I mean, at this point, if you were to show me this image, I would say it looks like it looked like Hurricane Elsa, to be honest. When Elsa was a tropical storm, obviously, because obviously Elsa looked a lot better when it got to 75 miles an hour, and then 80 obviously for the Lesser Antilles. But I mean, look at this thing. This is a really good looking PTC. You see clearly a good amount of vorticity, clearly some good counterclockwise spin and vorticity going around that surface low there, as well as just overall good amount of banding, good convection burst to the northeast of the low pressure where we have those 35 miles an hour kind of just right there. Overall, it seems looking very good. Obviously, it's a very small looking storm. However, it is really getting its act together and taking advantage of the environment it is in. Obviously, we do have a little bit of a dry air kind of just to the north of this actual main system. However, we see a lot of kind of convection overall storms coming off portions of South America. It's looking pretty good ahead of this storm here, so I would not rule out the possibility for it possibly a moderate tropical storm. When I say moderate tropical storm, I'm not even mentioning a high-end tropical storm or low-end category 1. It's because the amount of land fraction it's likely to take out. It's probably going to go through all of the Greater Antilles, including Puerto Rico, Hispaniola, and Cuba. So a lot of interaction. However, it's good if this storm does go like this because it'll avoid the trough and the PV streamer towards the north. But overall, it seems looking really good. A lot of convection, a lot of banding overall. Looks like we do have a pretty well-defined closed low-level circulation. So this thing's definitely getting its act together. So here's looking at the actual National Hurricane Center cone here, the first advisory for PTC6, and obviously there's a look at the actual current location. So actually, I believe this was, I guess I named the PTC at 5 o'clock. So there it is, the actual current location in the National Hurricane Center. It does want it to be a tropical storm, actually for the Lesser Antilles and portion of the Leeward Islands, and then staying as a long track tropical storm for all the way up near the Key West and Keys region. So actually, we do have tropical storm watches issued for portions of the Leeward Islands, U.S. Virgin Islands, and as well Lesser Antilles. And then we do obviously have a tropical storm watches for all Puerto Rico and portions of Hispaniola for much of the Dominican Republic coast, and almost actually extending into portions of the Haiti coast. So overall, let's actually look at the like we did say, it was going to be 50 miles an hour, basically peak here. So it's going to be maybe 50 miles an hour. What was it? 50, I think, at 36 hours. So the peak will be just before actually portions of Puerto Rico. And obviously, look at all the land fraction to go through portions, maybe just get affected by Puerto Rico land fraction wise, portions of Hispaniola, and then possibly skidding the Cuban coast like Irma did. Obviously, Irma kind of really skinned the Cuban coast like this. So it's going to definitely be very interesting, especially if the storm does get disorganized because of the very, very mountainous region terrain of Hispaniola and portions of Puerto Rico. That thing will most likely start getting disorganized. If it does get disorganized and it skins the Cuban coast, it could very well hurt it. However, again, there's going to be really a less chance this thing does run into drier, and actually a better chance it gets to really a more favorable environment because of the big wave of moisture coming off South America that's going to be impacting across these regions. So overall, this thing could very well have a good chance to possibly redeem itself after a land traction and possibly be very interesting for portions of the eastern Gulf of Mexico. So definitely watching out for portions of the northeast Gulf of Mexico. I'm really watching out for portions of Big Bend, including Apalachicola, Pensacola, Destin, Mobile, and portions of Gulfport. So overall, really watching out those. So if you're in Puerto Rico, Hispaniola, and Liberty Island, and overall Lesser Antilles, I would definitely keep a very close eye on this because this thing's definitely going to act. It's definitely going to act together. Obviously, there's really not much really worry about. Dry air shouldn't be a big threat at the moment. The big threat obviously for dry air will be for 93L, which is now a 0-0. There's really obviously no confidence at all for 93L, and I really did not have much confidence at all. So overall, just keeping a very, very close eye on PTC6 and possibly to be Fred, and maybe we get letter F within the next 12 or 18 hours. So here's now a look here at the actual 18Z intensity guidance for PTC6. Obviously, I believe the tropical tidbits continues to have it as an invest 94L, but there it is at 30 knots. They're obviously 35 miles an hour, and the majority want to have this forming within less than the next 12 hours. So there is a small chance this could very well form tonight. That would be very, very interesting. That will most likely affect much of the forecasted strength because obviously it was not expected to get 40 till the next 12 hours. So if it were to get 40, possibly now, at that point I think they would just put it as a tropical storm instead of a PTC because at that point, obviously it'll actually have the actual tropical storm winds, and obviously it will no longer be a PTC, nor will it be portions of no longer will obviously be a threat for it to become a tropical depression because obviously if it's at 40, it's going to go all the way from a PTC back to a tropical tropical storm. Sorry, I was kind of zoning out there, but overall, the majority of the models kind of want to have this forming, and then we have 50% kind of having it going up to possibly around let's see here, 45 miles an hour, then slightly weakening because of the landfalls, and then going back up. And I think there's definitely a good chance this peak winds will be in portions of the eastern Gulf of Mexico as it's going to have a lot overall less land interaction, better conditions, very warm waters, very deep ocean heat content, less shear, a lot of moisture overall. So I think there's definitely a very good chance this could get to maybe a high-end tropical storm. I wouldn't rule the possibility for a very, very weak Category 1 in the eastern Gulf of Mexico, but I think it's very unlikely. So I'm going to go maybe with a peak forecast of anywhere from 65 to 70 miles an hour. And the peak forecast, I think, will be located across the eastern Gulf of Mexico before landfall, and then the other 50% have it forming and then weakening and no longer becoming a tropical storm. But obviously, this will be Fred very soon, and then weaken because of landfall or land interaction, and then go back up because of the eastern Gulf of Mexico. Here's the actual track though. So the majority actually want to have, almost all of them want to have it south of Puerto Rico. So that's going to be obviously allowing for it to no longer be a big threat because of the let's see here, there's the there's a look at the actual let's see here, that's gonna be because of the PV streamer, basically the potential vorticity, and there's no longer going to be much of a threat shear wise because of the PV streamer as well overall because of the trough we kind of have set up there, kind of bringing a lot of shear across portions of the Caribbean, specifically the northeastern Caribbean. So obviously now that it's kind of further southward, it will have a better chance, I guess, of staying formation. However, there's still a pretty big con, and that's going to be all the land interaction because a lot of the models actually kind of going through all Hispaniola and then running much of the Cuban coast here, and then we still have the Keys there in Florida. So it's overall going to be very interesting. There's a lot of pros and cons. I think overall this is a better chance of forming. Obviously, even though if it went north of Puerto Rico, it will have a lot less land interaction, but the dryer will just be absolutely crazy, and as well shear will be rather high within that region. So I think this is definitely the best scenario. Obviously, just due to the weak Bermuda high, just overall how it's so far west, there's not going to be much of the actual western steering, so it's not going to go into like an Elsa track. That's not what we're expecting here overall. But that's what we have track wise. So I'm going to really watch out for a portion of Florida. Let's see, the 18Z GFS kind of wants to have it really taking a northeast turn very soon, up to near Naples or even portions near Key West. However, I think reasonably, or possibly the CMC is a little bit more reasonable, and I wouldn't rule out the possibility for a landfall near Alabama or portions of Big Bend, Florida. So let's now get a look at the 12Z GFS model run. So obviously, let's get here the next 6 hours. They obviously have it. There's the actual low pressure stuff associated within the African Eastern Leeway there in the obviously associated with the tropical trough. And then obviously the GFS wants to have it now at 1,009 millibars. I believe right now it's at 1,010, so I think that's a little bit inaccurate, and obviously it's not updated. We are still waiting for 18Z. I think the 18Z and 0Z models will be a lot more consistent or obviously reasonable. And then the GFS has a kind of skiing portion of Puerto Rico and staying north of Dominican Republic and Hispaniola, and then kind of staying north of the Cuban coast, but really dying out a lot because of the non-Atlantic traction. And obviously, as well, the GFS kind of has it going north of the Hispaniola region, kind of like that. So it's going to be a lot closer to the actual PV streamer, and as well closer to the actual trough, which will bring in a lot drier. And obviously, we're going to be watching after some SAL to actually make its way just behind this, just behind PTC6. If it were to be a lot further northward, there would be a lot better chance that it does get suffocated by SAL. But then the GFS kind of has it now doing a CMC and actually making landfall in the eastern Gulf of Mexico. They're at 1,009 millibars and 150 hours, and then 1,008 millibar landfall, or actually 1,010 millibar landfall for a portion of Apalachicola. So it looks like the GFS is no longer showing that eastern Florida kind of system or Georgia system. And actually, I did mention yesterday, which you guys didn't hear me, that I did say the CMC model does seem to be more realistic or more reasonable. It's exactly what model trends are now kind of leaning towards, kind of a CMC agreement and actually consistency. So it's definitely very, very interesting what they're showing here, because that would definitely bring in a better chance for possibly getting peak strength after and not before the actual greater Antilles landfall. So let's actually get a look here what the CMC wants to say. So CMC here within the next 6 hours wants to have, there's that little area of close isobars, possibly 1,014 millibars. And then they have it at 1,010 millibars, making landfall in Hispaniola, and then sitting off portions of the Cuban coast. And although it does hit portions near Homestead and obviously portions near Key Largo, it does not do such a sharp turn to the northwest and actually makes landfall now at 1,002 millibars for portions of Apalachicola. So actually the GFS and CMC are basically taking it right exactly in the same area. Let's now go and get a look here at the actual icon, see what the icon is going to want to say for this system. So there, obviously, they have this system, obviously, within around 1,014, 1,013 millibars. But then they obviously kind of have him doing a CMC move and kind of skidding northern Florida. However, it looks like the icon wants to do like what the what the GFS was showing yesterday, and that's going to be going across portions of eastern Florida. The European now is actually showing an area of vorticity associated with this closed surface is low and obviously low circulation going kind of clockwise. So they actually were not really showing anything. I believe yesterday at like 12, there were like no storms at all showing anything, or no model showing anything at all. But now Europeans back once again jumping on this, having it making landfall near the Windward Islands and obviously Virgin Islands as well, and then having it actually make landfall and actually doing something very interesting, actually doing kind of a CMC and GFS move, taking it very close to the Big Bend and possibly Apalachicola and Panama City Beach. So overall, very, very interesting move. Actually, the European takes it right over my house. So overall, it's going to be very interesting now that the European's back on it again. So here's that. Let's actually now start looking at the actual GFS vorticity. So GFS having a decent amount of vorticity. I think 18Z and 0Z model runs will be very, very interesting. Obviously, now that this thing is a PTC, there is confidence this will be possibly a tropical storm within the next 6 or 12 hours. So here's a look at the actual 850 millibar height on 850 millibar vorticity, and it's looking pretty good for a good amount of vorticity here. Getting a lot of convergence and overall a good amount of just structure within this actual system as well. A lot's been in the atmosphere, so we're going to be seeing overall a good amount of surface convergence. That's going to really allow for these storms to continue to blow up here overall, helping the storm and showing their signs of this thing developing and over strengthening. But then it gets a really good vorticity signature, really nice vorticity signature actually just before portion of Puerto Rico. That's exactly where the National Hurricane Center wants its peak at 50 miles an hour. And then you kind of see just this really convergence and overall vorticity really dies out. And then once again, it kind of comes back into the Gulf of Mexico. And I think that's exactly where this peak will come from. Let's now get a look here at the GFS 10-meter wind speeds in miles an hour. So obviously you see an area basically around 30-ish miles an hour, but like I did say, 12Z is going to be kind of a little bit less intense as it would be or if it were 1800Z, especially since the miles are now behind. Since obviously this was basically obviously officially PTC at around 5 o'clock Eastern time. And obviously 12Z comes out way before that. So there is a lot less confidence in it becoming a tropical storm or anything like that anytime soon. But now you can kind of see it with the next 11 hours or so. GFS once again has it now where it is at the moment. So it looks like the GFS is basically around 11 hours behind. As you go forward, though, then you can kind of see overall now GFS picking up a lot stronger, 42 miles an hour now in the next 18 hours as it goes towards the northern Lesser Antilles, and then getting back to 43.4 miles an hour. So GFS actually wants to have it kind of going a little bit on track towards a National Hurricane Center as they had around 50, but you can kind of see the GFS is getting it at basically around almost a 45-mile peak, and then bringing in obviously as Puerto Rico will be to the obviously area of the northeast quadrant. Puerto Rico, specifically the eastern side, could very well get a good amount of effects here, actually, wind wise and overall floating wise. And then obviously the thing rapidly dies out, and then obviously now we get it back to possibly 44, maybe 45 miles an hour. So it's going to definitely be a very interesting scenario. I think this could get quite interesting with the next 24-ish hours. I would not rule out the possibility if it does get to maybe 60 before portions of East Bend, since it really won't mainly affect Puerto Rico, but it's going to be very interesting. Let's now get a look here at the actual where the dry air is. Obviously, like I did say, you see the really good amount of Bermuda High bringing some really dry and sunny conditions across portions there. That very strong ridge, because you really see that really strong ridge kind of going like that associated with the actual Bermuda High. And then we're seeing that really strong amount of shear kind of bringing a lot of deep and very thick SAL across portions of northwest Africa. And then we see a little bit actually towards the west here, a little bit of that drier previously kind of pushed for the Bermuda High in front of this African easterly wave of where we're actually not no longer really AEW, but just a small monsoon wave. And it's going to really struggle. However, as you see, it looks like PTC6 really did take a lot of almost 93 L's moisture. That's exactly why it is still alive. It's actually going to be seeing a decent moisture bubble. However, it looks like there's going to be a big threat here within the next 30-ish hours or so that some dry air is going to be really looping around and possibly cutting off a lot of that eastern portion of that moisture bubble. However, like I did say, it's going to be a lot of moisture and actually a pretty significant moisture wave coming off South America, and that's going to be the reason why that this PTC will survive and actually possibly revive back in the Gulf of Mexico, because we see a ton of moisture, a very large area of high precipitation, and that's going to really help this storm get its act together. And then last but not least, we are seeing some very deep ocean heat content in this expected region. So it's going to be very interesting how it interacts with that. But I hope you guys enjoyed the video, and I'll see you guys later.